Good morning, everybody. My name is Michael R. Roser, and I am co-founder and chief coaching facilitator at my company, strategiclifecoaching.com. Please visit us for a recap of this video and others at my website, abundantlifeslc.com. You guys can't even believe how wonderful it is for me to be speaking with you today, a group of sales people, men and women, and just I'm telling you, you guys are the engine that makes each company go. But what I want to talk to you guys about today is any engine in a car, a boat, a plane requires maintenance, and sometimes a lot of it. And I'd like to speak to you about that today so that you guys can keep fresh and keep motivated and keep doing what you do so that the accountants can count it all up and pay taxes on it. The human resources people can organize all of you, and the product managers can keep developing product for you guys to sell and sell very well. I wanted to start with because of that maintenance that sometimes, certainly in my sales career over 35 years as a financial consultant, I found myself at times in very much need of maintenance, although I didn't think so. And I found myself kind of trudging along day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, seemingly always to be fighting something or somebody. And I found in my travels that it's most of it, was internal in nature. And where I found myself 5 years ago was over 300 pounds, had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, suffering from post-traumatic syndrome disorder, anxiety, and depression, and just could not figure out, after all of the financial success that I had had and the many awards and sales conferences that I had attended, why I just didn't feel better. One day, embarrassingly enough, I found myself in my house sequestered after having turned to my old friend alcohol to try to calm all of these feelings that I had just mentioned, and awoke to a megaphone outside of my house, and a SWAT team had surrounded my house and were not very happy. And they had shut down a major highway through the middle of my town that I'm from, Libertyville, Illinois, and were not in a very good mood at all. And the reason for it was that earlier in the day, I had taken a turn to go over to see my wife and get some things out of that house, and had inadvertently bumped a school bus. There was no damage to the bus or to my car, and nobody, of course, was injured or anything, but I simply went around the corner, got what I needed from my wife, and went back home. The story, of course, is much deeper than that, and I was very emotionally in ruins. And I had gotten myself to that point from many things that I did not address, which I'll get to in a minute. So as I woke up from a nap, I found myself in this situation and had no idea why a SWAT team was surrounding my house. Anyway, much to my chagrin, I walked out, hands up, and had to be very, very cautious in how I came out of my house, and was taken to the hospital and detoxed from a rather large amount of alcohol that I had consumed earlier in that day after I had gotten home. And that was my life. And I had been helicoptered several times, flight for lives, because of my alcohol addiction. And it really hurts to tell you about this, only because I thought at that particular moment that my life was over, that my reputation was shot. As the newspaper articles continued over the following week, I fell deeper and deeper into a pit of despair that I can't even describe to you. Because I'm a pretty strong-willed person, pretty stubborn, and was a very fine athlete at one time in my life, I did manage to pick myself up and get things back together, kind of, sort of, and managed to work a couple more years at my company very successfully. And then the wheels literally just fell off the cart. One day, after detoxing on my own for 4 days, which was February 4th, 2018, I was asked to attend a 12-step meeting very close by to my house that Monday on February 8th. And as of this video, I'm happy to report that I have had 820 days of continuous sobriety as a result of that program, those steps, and the absolutely wonderful people that helped me and coached me through a spiritual life that I now can't even imagine the value that it's given to me. So that morning, as I was really unable to even pick up a cup of coffee and stop myself from shaking, I managed to go to the breakout rooms and tell people and catch people up on what my life had been like for the past couple of years. And as I was walking out of the meeting, a gentleman approached me and got in my face and said, "Michael, what in the F are you doing? You are dying right in front of me, and I'm not going to allow it to happen." And he asked me a question that changed my life forever. And he asked me plainly, "Michael, who are you accountable to today?" And my answer, after kind of stuttering and staggering a little bit, was nobody. You know, I was my own business owner. I was running a successful financial planning practice. You know, I was out for me all the time, everywhere and everything. And he said to me, painfully, "That's the first honest answer you've given me in over 11 years that I've known you." And that, in fact, was embarrassing simply because I had been going around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for 11 years, shortchanging, shortcutting, taking what I wanted and leaving the rest. But the problem was my filter was taking the things that just continued to inflate the problem. I wasn't wanting to take the spiritual tools that had been laid at my feet and get to work on those, thusly changing myself internally. I just didn't think that I could change. So what I did was I started to focus on exactly, who I am and what is making me tick. And this was a process that in earlier videos that I've done, there's a caution here, because whenever you start to look at yourself internally and look at the things that are causing bad behaviors and actions, really come down to thoughts. And my thinking was way off. It was very self-centered and very self-motivated. And therefore, I was failing at what I will call life. And so what I did was, in the 12 steps, there's a process that is what is called an inventory, a fearless and moral inventory. And I find the word fearless, again, as that caution, because I started to dredge up and dig up some things in my past that were very, very painful, but were necessary for me to take a look at. And what it did is it enlightened me to actually who I actually was at that particular point in time in my life. And although it was painful, it was extraordinarily helpful, because if I didn't know who I was, it was going to be very difficult to change those things. So I set out on a process to do that. The first thing was that as I went to see personal trainers and nutritionists, I wasn't sleeping very well. Again, I was very overweight, in very poor health. I had to look at that first. And I went to see my intern. My worst fears were confirmed. And he looked at me and said, "Michael, if you don't start to change the way you're living, you're going to be the richest guy in the cemetery. And I really, really did not want that. But at the same time, I really didn't believe that my life had any value, that there wasn't much that I could offer anybody anymore. And as I started to change my diet, and I mean, I started with a personal trainer. I couldn't do 3 push-ups. I could hardly do a squat. Very, very deconditioned, and years of smoking cigars and cigarettes on the golf course and so on and so forth. And of course, drinking way, way too much. So as I started that process and I started to feel better, I started to sleep a little bit better. I wasn't eating so much sugar and drinking so much caffeine in order to get my big body going every morning. I felt a lot better. And as I found, not only did I feel better physically, but that also started to bleed into another facet of my life that I believe really needs to be in balance, was my emotional state. And it was, like I said, in ruins. And as I began to feel better physically, I started to have a little bit better outlook on how I looked, and emotionally I started to come around. And I'll caution you here too, I have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety and post-traumatic syndrome, and I had been given medications for many years to help to balance those manic swings between just complete depression and manic. And now I find in my life, again, because I've done a lot of work, is I find myself just rotating very, very small. I can manage these, and when I'm feeling a little off, I can do something about it. And if I start feeling, a little too full of myself and pride and ego, I can manage that as well. The only thing in my life that was really going pretty well, although that was starting to fray too, honestly, was my finances. And so there really wasn't a lot I needed to do there, other than I had to make a really big decision on if I was going to try to stay in balance emotionally. I had to take a look at whether or not I could continue as a chartered financial consultant and a chartered life underwriter with my financial planning practice. And as I talked with my sponsors and I talked with all these assets that I added to my life because I was unable to do it on my own, it became pretty clear that I was going to have to sell my practice in order to take that time and really, reinvent myself and to reconcile with the damage that I had done. And it was a wonderful process, but at the time it was very, very difficult to give up my identity. I was a financial planner. That's what I did, and I loved doing it, and I made my clients a lot of money and helped them to achieve weddings and retirements and things that they wanted to do in their life, vacation homes and better standard of living, and so on. And I really, really enjoyed that, and I couldn't imagine life without being a financial consultant, but it was something that I really had to do. And finally, I was spiritually bankrupt, guys. I did not believe in a God. I did, and I was at times very, very religious in my life, but I was unable to take those fine religious practices and the homilies from the priests and actually apply that to my daily life. So I believed in God, but I really didn't think God had anything or wanted anything to do with me. And I will tell you that that was wrong in my particular case. And my wonderful fiance told me that, Michael, you have to become a vessel and you have to become strong enough to actually be able to start on a transformation plan, to start on this restoration process. In the condition that I was in, I had no energy, I had no drive, I had no direction on how I was going to change and how and what did I want to become. I didn't know any of that. And so starting out very slowly, I started to get some direction. And I laugh because a lot of people don't believe in God, and I was told that it's an acronym of good orderly direction or the great outdoors. I choose to call it God as I understand God, but that's not important as I found out. I put many blocks in front of me in order to change. Thankfully, that wasn't one of them. But again, I didn't know how to apply those principles into my daily life. So I was in my travels and making some pretty good progress. And one time down in Florida, where we winter, I went to an AA meeting, and they start at 6:15 in the morning, which a bunch of retired people, that's commitment to me to get up that early every single morning, 7 days a week. And I'm an early riser myself, so it fits in pretty well with what I'm doing. But there was an article out of one of the publications of AA called The Grapevine. And a young gal from New York had written this wonderful article about being puzzled. And she formulated it in the sense of, I keep doing exactly the same things, expecting a different result. And that was puzzling to her, because underneath that, she really wanted to change. And she had made many vows. And like me, she had said she was sorry for past behaviors and actions, but her thinking she kept thinking incorrectly, and therefore by thinking incorrectly, her behaviors and her actions followed that thinking, as they do with all of us. And as I was sitting in the meeting, and as this wonderful article was being read, I felt this sense of overwhelming power coming over me, and it was like drinking a glass of water out of a fire hose. And the thought hit me that, wow, it puzzled really isn't a state of mind, to me anyway. It is life in and of itself. And it began to occur to me that I had a pile of puzzle pieces laying all over my house. Some were in the living room, some in the kitchen, some in the garage, some in the garbage can that I threw out that I didn't think fit or didn't think mattered. And it occurred to me that why am I not putting that puzzle of my life together? What's preventing me from doing that? Well, as I found out later in the process of that moral inventory that I described, that fearless moral inventory, was I really didn't want to put that puzzle together. I was afraid of what it was going to look like. In fact, I was sure of what it was going to look like, and it was going to be filled with SWAT teams and helicopter rides, flight for lives, broken relationships, frustrations, anger, all of that. So I didn't want to put it together, and I was very resistant of even looking at it. And so in that process, my sponsor, a wonderful gentleman, the most spiritual person I've met, came over to my house, and he started putting that puzzle together. And I got very, very mad at him. I didn't want to look at it, and I didn't want to do anything with regard to it. And he talked and graciously started telling me stories of his past, his puzzle, and the things that he had done in his life. And I listened to it, and it resonated with me. And because the acid test for me was, here's a man dressed in a suit and tie, very successful man, and he's telling me these stories of his past, and it was incongruent because I was looking at a very healthy, very peaceful man. And so as he was telling me these stories, I didn't know it at the time, but I started to get some hope. Maybe this is going to be a good process, and maybe I ought to allow him to do it. I find that I call that now, and the program calls it contempt prior to investigation. I was a very certain man. I had all of the answers. And one of my spiritual advisors, who I love dearly, told me, Michael, there's an old Celtic proverb, and beware of it. Beware of the man who's certain. And so, combined with contempt prior to investigation and my way clearly not working, I started to get down on my knees and help him put this puzzle together. And what I found was the puzzle wasn't that bad, and but it did have some very distinct pictures that were taking shape, and I really didn't understand at the time what it all meant. So it seemed like to me for a very long period of time, I'm going to call it 8 years from 2010 until 2018, that the puzzle pieces that I seemed to be getting every day were black, or they were red, or they were gray. And day after day, puzzle piece after puzzle piece, it was black and red and gray. And as I came to find out now, as I did put my puzzle together, that was simply a point in time in my life where I was struggling or where things were not well. But as I uncovered in that pile, there was a lot of blue and a lot of yellow and a lot of green, a lot of orange, and that picture had taken shape. And as I got on this spiritual process, every single time as I look back at it now, where I was given those challenges in my life, what did I do with them? And when I look at that puzzle now, it has color, it has clarity, it has depth to it, because not everything in my life or in yours is going to be a bed of roses. That's not how it works. So when we're given challenges and when we're given difficulties, what do we do about them is what's important to me these days. And so as I started to put that together and as I started to see it taking shape, it wasn't so bad. And whether I like it or not, and whether you guys like it or not, every single day that we get up is another piece of that puzzle. And now, very clearly, I know exactly where to put it, and I don't judge each piece as I'm getting it, because now I have this enlightenment and this just unbelievable knowledge that that is simply one piece that's going exactly where it's supposed to go, and it's exactly the way it's supposed to be. And as long as I put forth that effort each morning to put that piece where it's supposed to go, my life stays in balance. As soon as I start to take my will back, as soon as I start to think I'm all that again, and so on and so forth, those puzzle pieces can start to pile up again. And that comes in so many forms for me. The deadline that I've got to get that project done by such and such a date. If I procrastinate that, if I don't take it each day as it comes, then my anxiety and sometimes my depression builds because that deadline's not going away. And I get further and further anxious because I'm not doing what I need to do to get it. I waited till the last moment my entire life to cram for exams in college. Not the best way as I see it now in order to handle it. So a really quick story about that was my fiance and I are combining our homes, and last summer this program taught me exactly what I needed to know. So I got to pack up a 2,500 square foot house, and I decided that I was going to do 2 boxes per day. I closed at the end of July in 2019, and I started this process in April earlier. And I packed a couple boxes a day, and in my garage they started to build, and these are going to Florida, these are going to storage, these are going to my new office. I packed up the china, 1 plate at a time, and by the middle of July, very comfortably, without frustration or anger, that job was done. And this program has taught me to take 1 day at a time. What tasks are in front of me today that I can accomplish, that I can get done to alleviate anything building up inside of me as time goes on. When those challenges do come, where an ex-wife or ex-husband or your boss or anything starts to build up, make sure you're taking care of that and make sure you're handling that on a daily basis so that it doesn't build and cause more sleepless nights down the road. I found it extraordinarily helpful. So again, now when I look back, this was also an epiphany, and this took a little bit more time, frankly. So as I was putting my puzzle together and getting it organized and finding out that it wasn't so bad, another epiphany hit me, and I believe it very profound for me, because earlier I had talked about, what does God want to do with me? I believe that there's a God, but what part do I have in this grand scheme, in this universe that we're all such a tiny, tiny part of? Well, as I was putting that puzzle piece together, I then began to see, as I was going to Marytown here in Libertyville, actually Mundelein, it's a Saint Maximilian Kolbe shrine, and there's these beautiful mosaics that are all over the chapel and the churches. And that concept hit me that my puzzle then gets put in this larger, much larger mosaic of life. And I started to see, as my friend George Bailey saw in the movie It's a Wonderful Life that plays every Christmas, that although it's a very, very tiny part of the life and the mosaic of life, I have a part in it. And as I found, I have a really rich and beautiful part of it. And the people around me and who I'm, in contact with on a daily basis, that I had value to those relationships as long as I'm staying spiritually connected and I'm trying to be a person of service these days. So when I took an even further step back away, I found that there'd be a hole. It would be a small but noticeable hole in God's plan for the universe if I'm not doing my little part on a day-to-day basis. And I have to tell you, the power of that, for the first time in my adult life, I actually felt part of something instead of apart from all the time. And while I am a human being, and believe me, I have many, many foibles in my life and things that I have to work on, I feel such a greater sense of peace today because I'm not trying to defend my life. I'm not trying to force my life upon anybody else. I'm simply in this stream that's going along. And let me tell you another metaphor that my wonderful sponsor told me is, Michael, you are pushing a 4x8 sheet of plywood up the river. Why are you doing that? Can't you see the effort that it takes to go against the current? Not only just walking yourself, but pushing this gigantic piece of lumber and the strain that it takes to do that. That strain is not sustainable over a period of time. You simply don't have the energy to keep it going. That was very profound for me because, as I described after the SWAT team incident, my own self-will and my dogged determination to fix everything, I walked up that stream with that that 4x8 piece of plywood for another 2 years. And finally he said, Michael, just, and also I have to say, he said, why are you going that way in the first place? Why are you trying to rebuild a life that had collapsed so profoundly around you that made you literally sick and literally having to turn to a chemical in order to make you feel better? Why don't you just set that piece of plywood down, climb aboard, and let the current of life take you where it's supposed to take you, and simply sit on that piece of plywood and enjoy where it's headed? I don't know where it's going, and I certainly don't have any control of the speed at which I'm going, and I'm sure there will be some rapids and some tenseness as I go along, but I couldn't be at more peace just allowing life to come at me each day. And again, God, as I understand God, Scripture is full of calls from my God to be with Him presently, to be in the present, to live each day to its fullest, and allow yourself to be a part of that life current. Very important for me, and it changed everything, because now, again, I don't find myself defending. I don't find myself looking backwards to what I used to have or what I used to be like. The joy of going forward in the sunshine, with the clouds and the trees and everything, it's unbelievably wonderful for me today. And lastly, I would say, if the puzzle isn't a metaphor for you, I kind of get that, because puzzles are difficult. And one more thing about it, there was a movie that I love. It was called The Accountant. I believe it was with Ben Affleck, and he was a challenged person emotionally, and he used to put puzzles together, but he put them together upside down. And how hard would that be? But he accomplished it, because very talented and very focused on putting those puzzles together. And I believe that, again, as my fiance correctly said, I wasn't a good enough vessel to begin the process to put the thing together at all, but then to put it together right side up. Because I'll tell you, a back of a puzzle is brown, all brown, and there isn't anything on it. And so that's obvious. But it wasn't for me at the time, and it is now, and I'm very, very grateful for that. So the last part of this, I would say, and this wonderful gentleman that I met, who used to be a stand-up comedian, and his name is Lindell, and he always said that he's grateful for the good and bad things in his life. Again, he's getting the grays, he's getting the blacks, he's getting the reds, but he understands that there's growth in that for him now, and what lessons is he supposed to learn when he's among the black or the red in his life. And he gave me this beautiful picture of the last day that I'm on earth, when God finishes that puzzle for me. And he gave me this wonderful thing to consider, which is, my last day, I pass, and I'm gone, and hopefully I'm going up to heaven as I understand heaven. And my family, the people that I love and care for, are in charge of that last piece, the last piece of my puzzle to complete me, at least the earthly years. And those people would take that puzzle and they would put it precisely where it's supposed to go, the end, and there is my picture, there is my life, and there is where I fit in the mosaic of life. And what a wonderful thing that felt for me. And I started to cry when he said it, because just 820 days ago, my family would have gotten that last piece and had no earthly idea where to put it. And would they have taken the time to put that pile together to figure out where the last one was supposed to go? And it seemed to me that I want to be as good a person as I possibly can, and not leave them with that burden of that pile. I want them to be able to put that back in and then see Dad's life, husband's, brothers, whatever, life as it was. And so I encourage you guys, as salespeople, to continue to maintain that engine. You are what drives the company. You are what keeps everything paid, all the bills paid, and so forth. But you guys need to maintain and keep yourself charged up, keep yourself organized so that you can do the best job you can, because people are counting on you, not only your salespeople, your family, and so on, but your clients. They need those products that you're giving to them. They need you to be there. They need you to be accountable. and responsible to helping them each day. So my wish for you is that you take some of this to heart, as I did, and really look at yourself and really become enlightened as to what makes you tick. And if there's anything in there that you need to work on, roll up your sleeves, take it one step at a time, make that beginning to change and restore your life. And I can promise you the benefits are amazing and they are terrific. Good luck to y'all. I hope you have a great rest of the year. Take care. Bye now.